Jalen Duren has long been one of the best prospects in the 2022 NBA draft, but he's really picked it up as of late. So where does that leave his stock? This is Floor and Ceiling. Let's break him down. This draft class is stacked with bigs, which is why it is important to get to know Jalen Duren. The former 5-star recruit joined Memphis a year early, and it has been an up and down season, but Duren definitely showed his skill, recently being named his conference's Freshman of the Year. At 6'10", 250 pounds with a 7'5" wingspan, Duren has similar dimensions to Dwight Howard. Not only that, but he does not turn 19 till November, making one of the most exciting prospects in the class, also one of the youngest. Just like Jalen Duren's game, let's start off simple. Duren is hyper efficient. Basically, he takes and makes shots at the rim. Early on in his NBA career, I would think you want to almost exclusively keep him there. Duren is a bouncy athlete who can play above the rim with ease. This also plays out in other areas of his game like we will get to, but on offense, Duren's second jump ability and length is key. Both of those things allow him to cover tons of room as a vertical spacer, and then Duren has good hands which he uses to catch and finish lobs. Duren is shooting 75% at the rim. He is definitely reliant on others, being that about 3 and 4 of his buckets at the basket are assisted, but I think there is more upside there. One thing to note about Memphis is that their playmaking and guard situation has been a mess all year. Despite that, Duren still has 58 dunks as a freshman, and he has been a menace at the rim all season long. Duren is an easy fit in the dunker spot. He also gets up and down the floor quickly, so he can rim run and play above the rim in the open court. Duren can dunk off 1 or 2 feet and has had some violent dunks, honestly. You can see the basket shake after some of his throwdowns, but I like that ferocity. On a similar note, Duren also has the means to be lethal in the pick and roll. Again, I wish Duren had fallen into a better guard situation at Memphis, but the flashes are evident. Being the athlete that he is at 6'10", it is tough to stop Duren once he gets moving towards the basket. If you hit him on the roll, be it with the lob or with the pocket pass, Duren can easily gather and then go up for a dunk. I expect this part of his game to be magnified even more in the NBA with better spacing and creation. Duren's ability to play above the rim is also manifested on the glass. Duren is a powerful rebounder. He averages 18 boards per 100 possessions and has great rebounding percentages on both ends of the floor. Rebounding is a good indicator for NBA bigs, which is partly why I am focusing so much on this, but beyond that, Duren is simply a very solid rebounder, period. The first thing to point out, like I said, is his second jump ability. I've mentioned this in other videos, but this allows Duren to go up, grab the rebound, and then go back up to finish. Here is an example of his rebounding potential. Duren comes flying in from off the screen to create a second chance, which eventually leads to an open 3. He also has a great motor that is worth pointing out, especially for a big that is only still 18 years old. Against Alabama here, Duren crashes the glass to secure 2 offensive boards and then gets himself the and 1. Duren can vacuum up rebounds in a crowd, and he has a great nose for the ball. You can watch him track plays and then secure second chance opportunities for his team in a variety of ways. Branching out to some of Duren's self-creation, let's start with his work in the post. To kick us off, there is the obvious. Duren is a massive human being. At 18, he already has similar body measurements to Dwight Howard, like I said earlier. He is 6'10", really long with a 7'5" wingspan, and chiseled at 250 pounds. All of those things bode well for Duren around the basket, which is where I think he will get most of his shots. It is likely that Duren will always be a big that you want your guard to create easy looks for. However, Duren's upside becomes higher if he can also create his own shot from time to time. Until now, there have been some flashes down low. Duren feels good dropping the shoulder left and making a strong, sudden move. There have been flashes of him going either way and playing through contact. Attacking mismatches for him in the NBA will be important. Duren will never likely get a huge diet of post-ups, but he needs to keep this up. If Duren can have sudden, aggressive, quick moves that he can use to muscle through others and finish, then that's really all he needs. Any other flashes at this point are a bonus, although more on how his jumper looks later. For all the flashes though, I still think Duren is too one-dimensional in the post. This is not overly worrying though for a couple of reasons. The first, as I said, is that it's not like teams are going to be posting Duren every possession in the NBA. He will get these reps from time to time, but just that. The second, which seems simple but can be forgotten, is that he is still so young. Well, I'm not that concerned. You need some patience with Duren despite his already existing strengths, so any growth in this area is more of a mid to long-term focus in my opinion. One thing that gets me excited about Duren are the flashes we've seen of a face-up jumper. Duren has a fairly clean stroke at 6'10", and I think that can be a useful tool for him down the line. More improvement is still needed, but Duren is shooting 40% on 2-point jumpers. That's on 67 attempts, so it's not a super tiny sample size either. Still, this is very much a work in progress. The flashes are intriguing, but not truly worth buying into right now. Duren is still a very long ways away from being a genuine floor spacer. For one, he's essentially taken no threes at all in his freshman season for Memphis. That separates him from someone like DeAndre Ayton, a big who I think is comparable in some ways, but who also took and made more threes at Arizona. Outside of that, Duren is shooting about 60% from the free throw line, and again his shot is not busted, but it's not like it's a reliable weapon in his arsenal. Now let's get into Duren's passing, which is one of my favorite attributes of his. Duren is still inconsistent, but he has shown some very appealing flashes of making and executing reads on the short roll. We already know he can be impactful as a play finisher in ball screen situations, so the intrigue with Duren goes up even more if he can also create out of the roll. Duren still seems more comfortable passing to his strong side, but there have been a couple glimpses where he has made the tougher skip pass. If you look at the stats, me saying this might surprise you. After all, Duren has 55 turnovers to just 27 assists. However, I buy the flashes, and I think the eye test is very important here. I'll get into this more in a few moments, but I think Duren very often makes the right reads. It's just that the execution is improvable. In the post, Duren can deal with doubles, he is patient and composed, and usually does not lose his head when he spots another defender coming over to help. In other words, Duren is at ease making reads with his back to the basket, or at least relative for an 18-year-old. Honestly, he can make some impressive reads though, and Duren does not just kick the ball out wherever. You can see that there is some intent to his passing. Duren understands spaces and angles. He is not perfect there yet, but I think there is plenty of reason for optimism despite the bad numbers. Because generally speaking, like I said, I don't take issue with Duren's reads. He makes the right ones most of the time I think, but his execution and processing time can still improve. Duren is seeing what you want on the floor a lot of the time, and he is pretty advanced with his creativity, but the execution and skill level has not yet caught up. Sometimes the weight or the zip on the pass is off. Other times it might be that Duren takes a little longer making the read that you would like. But between flashes like these, even if the ensuing pass is not perfect, and the stuff he has shown on the short roll and with his back to the basket, I feel pretty good about Duren's passing. He does not have to be an offensive fulcrum, but I think you can get real value out of his reads, especially as the jumper is coming along. None of this is to say Duren is faultless though. The most obvious thing is what I said earlier. He is turning the ball over twice as much as he is assisting. The flashes are great, but you eventually need them to translate into advantages more consistently. Otherwise, Duren is giving the other team a lot of possessions. Sometimes it's just that Duren misses reads, and again, this is natural for someone so young, which is why I prefer to focus on the positives. But when Duren turns the ball over, he can have some pretty ugly turnovers, that's not in doubt. Duren can be loose with his passing, and he really needs to work on getting his technique down. Often with him, it can be a case of right read, bad execution. Duren also needs to improve his awareness with his back to the basket. Generally, he can pass out of doubles, but he does not see them coming sometimes. Going down the other end of the floor, I am a big fan of Jalen Duren's defensive potential. Let's start by discussing my favorite part of his defensive game right now, which is his rim protection. Here, Duren's size obviously comes into play. Duren stands at about 6'10" with a 7'5" wingspan, and his chiseled 250-pound physique complements that and allows Duren to play through contact as a defender. What I mean by that is that Duren can go up, stay vertical, and take the bump while staying in the play. Attackers bounce off Duren, and he alters plays without necessarily getting the block. Because Duren is so big and he can cover ground quickly horizontally and vertically, Duren is just incredibly tough to shoot over. That gives him elite potential when it comes to rim protection. Then, Duren can also come up with some huge blocks at the basket, so good luck meeting him at the rim. The Memphis freshman averages more than 2 blocks per game and has a monster 10.3 block percentage. That means that Duren blocks more than 10% of the opponent's shots whenever he's on the floor. Duren can hang back or be a more active helper, but either way he is already a pretty terrific rim protector. Duren is an explosive leaper, and also he is long, so he can just kind of come into plays whenever. You don't have to be super close to Duren for him to alter the shot. As long as you're in his general surroundings, well, Duren can be a nuisance. This means that Duren has had some borderline violent blocks that honestly, well, they resemble a volleyball spike more than anything. Stepping away from the rim, Duren's defense is probably more versatile than his offense is right now. I believe that he can step out and guard in space. Duren is someone that I trust on switches. Like we've been talking about, Duren can cover tons of ground sideways and backwards, so I have no big concerns about him there. Duren can get down in a stance and stay there to contest at the rim where his length comes into play. Really, there is just no reason to target him on switches. Duren is not a mismatch because he is fine moving his feet on the perimeter, and college guards have largely been unable to punish him. Like with most young bigs, I'm sure there will be an NBA adjustment curve for Duren. But in the long term, I think he has the means to anchor a defense at the rim while also being able to check more perimeter-oriented players on switches whenever he has to. One final and small note is that I am intrigued by some of what Duren has shown in the passing lanes. Now these are only a few clips, but I wonder if there is ever a point in which Duren is comfortable enough with his handle to translate these situations into grab and goes. That's still a long ways away, obviously, if it ever comes, but look at this defensive clip. It is a monster possession by Duren. The first thing he does is stay with the guard on the drive. Then he patrols the rim, anticipates the baseline pass, and comes up with the steal. In terms of improvement areas, Duren's motor can fluctuate still. I want to see him always be locked in, although that's a little unreasonable for such a young big. One thing that is easily fixable is Duren not making attackers work hard enough in the post. At 250 pounds, that cannot be the case, and Duren should really be a post-resistant defender. Another thing that can pop up is that Duren can trust himself a bit too much at times. Because he is so long, strong, and physically gifted, Duren feels like he can always get back into the play. That is not always the case though, and the margins for error become narrower in the NBA, so you want to see him cut down on avoidable mistakes. Another area where there is room for growth is Duren's patience at the rim. To be fair, this is not a huge problem, but Duren can sometimes be too jumpy. He needs to be diligent and trust himself to stay down on plays. Overall though, Duren has all the tools that you want from an elite defender. You might just have to wait a little bit to see them translate. I'm gonna be honest and just come out and say it. I really like Jalen Duren, and I think that he deserves top 3 consideration. Now, that's not to say that that's where he's going to end up on my big board. I think that's still to be decided, but I cannot see him dropping past, the top 8 or so. I think that Jalen Duren, I think he's extremely talented, and with the right situation in mind, he could be a top 3 pick. Now, why do I think that? Well, on offense, he does not have the most creative of roles, but looking at guys like Isaiah Jackson, like DeAndre Ayton that had come along in the past few years, I do see some similarities. Duren's game, you keep it as simple as possible for him right now. He plays in the dunker, he plays in the pick and roll, he catches and finishes, he'll run the floor hard in transition. And at Memphis, he's shown that he can do all of those things despite not really being set up with a roster that has a pure point guard. Now, I'm sure that I will have another video or at least a post on Imani Bates, so we'll get into that then. Jalen Duren has been dealt a tough hand at Memphis, but he's made the best out of it. And over the last month or so, they have really improved. I believe top 10, I should say, in offense and defense, if I'm not mistaken. Jalen Duren, obviously, he's a big part of that. We've touched on what he can do offensively, in terms of himself, but he can also create for others, I think. The assist-to-turnover ratio right now, like I said in the video, is not good or ideal at all, but I do focus more on the reads more than the execution. I think he has the right ideas in mind. It's just about getting that technique down. But then on defense, well, I think we've all seen that Jalen Duren can be an absolute threat, an absolute terror on defense. Rim protection comes easily to him. 6'10", 7'5" wingspan, 250 pounds. can take contact in the air, can alter shots without necessarily getting the block. He's really good at staying vertical for an 18-year-old, which I've really, grown to be impressed by. And not only that, but he can get the actual block at the rim, block percentage of above 10%. Definitely, a guy that can hang back, can patrol the rim, can come up with some huge blocks. Can play above the rim with ease. And then at the same time, he can also step out on the perimeter, move his feet, and guard there, make things difficult for smaller players, for guards, for wings. I think that Jalen Duren in the NBA should have little to no problem doing that in the long term. I'm sure that there will be an adjustment curve, but that exists for really any other NBA young big, especially for those coming into the league for the first time. Overall, I have no real preoccupations about Jalen Duren defensively, and in the long term, I can see him becoming a first-team all-defense level of defender. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like, make sure to leave a comment telling me what you think of Jalen Duren. I apologize for, the 3-week break in between videos. Life just got busy, you know how it is, but we're back, so let me know what you think of Jalen Duren, and if you enjoyed the video, if you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.